Well, good morning. Welcome to the latest in our series of Meet the Artist. Now, I have said this a couple of times. I'm really excited. And I am genuinely really excited today. In fact, I could say, forgetting what I'm wearing, I'm tickled pink. Because I am tickled pink after years of trying to persuade rather, and failing. One of Scotland's best known artists to join our stable. And I am beyond excited. I'm going to introduce you to him right now to tell you that after years of being politically correct in the art world and whatever, and various reasons, we haven't managed to persuade him to join our stable. But now, as his only gallery in the northeast of Scotland, I'm thrilled to welcome and introduce you to Francis Boag. Hello, Francis.
Hi, David.
You seem relaxed.
Well, it is my house. I'm allowed to be relaxed here, yeah.
And a beautiful house and beautiful studio. Here we are in the heart of what's known as Mearns countryside. And we'll get on, Francis, to chatting about how you ended up here. But I'd like to go back. The people who follow these Meet the Artist videos, generally speaking, are people who've bought our paintings already and are on our mailing list. And this all started the start of the pandemic, the videos, and I was going to stop it, but Tom keeps telling me that the reaction is that everybody's fascinated about artists' biography. So let's go back to when you were born in Dundee and tell us a little bit about the early years.
Right, I was born in Dundee, well, not actually, that's not strictly true. I was born in Lochie, which is a little suburb of Dundee, though it probably would like to claim independence. And it was a row of mill workers' cottages, and it was called Tipperary because it was full of Irish immigrants. Irish had come over in the 1890s to work in the jute mills, and so it became a little enclave. And people from Tip, as it was known, it's a bit notorious, but I'm always proud of it, and I'm genuinely proud, and never tried to hide the fact that it had very humble beginnings, and was lucky through the time I was born, through the politics of the time even, that was given opportunities all my life to achieve the things, everything I want to achieve. Nobody stood in my way. I was able to advance as well as I could, which is maybe not something to be said about children today, unfortunately. So that was my beginnings.
And when you were a wee boy at school back in Lochie, did you have an interest in art?
Oh yes. Well, I wouldn't say art. I didn't know art. I was drawing was the thing. Everybody had got colouring books for Christmas and colouring pencils and stuff. And at school, when you go to school, everyone has their sort of niche. There's the lad who can spit the furthest, the one who can jump the highest. And I was one of the ones who drew. Everyone knew I was a drawer. If you wanted a drawing, even at 6, 7 years old, you came to me, and I would do a drawing for you. In fact, I would do usually Superman or something. But I went to visit just before they pulled the houses down in the 60s, I think it was at art school, to where I lived. And the walls were sort of white, the white plaster with a brown distemper. And on the stairs, this drawing of Superman had done, a little head of Superman. It was still there. I couldn't cut out, unfortunately, so I had to leave it. But that was it. That's what I did. I did it all the time. It was a fascination. It never occurred to me I was doing something different. It was just, and that's the way it's kind of always been.
So it's quite interesting. People always want to know was the ability to paint. But did you actually, let's say as an 8-year-old, ever think you might become a successful painter?
I'm as an 8-year-old. I'm not sure. I don't really. I said I don't have an ambition. Didn't want it to be anything else. I never thought, I'd do this or do that. It was to maybe to go to. When I realised there was a place called art school, I wanted to go there, which was really, for my mum and dad, really at 15 you should have left school and you worked somewhere and you handed your pay packet in to help the household. But so going to art school was a great leap of faith for them.
Did they support you throughout?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure they were getting stick from their friends who's saying, oh, well, let Francis do, why is he doing that? There's Jimmy, he's working in the coal mines and he's bringing in, but no, they never in any way tried to put me off. Right? They were very, well, that's the, that.
So it's well quoted that you went to the very famous Duncan of Jordanston. Did you love it from the moment you arrived, or was it tricky?
When I got the letter saying I'd been accepted, I was the only one from a school group who had applied who got in, and I was only not 16 and a wee bit, when I got that letter. It was quite, but to be honest, I looked about 13 and a half. So the first week or so at school, I mean, I'm wandering around with these people with beards and moustaches, and I honestly, I mean, it must have been funny, I think. But I mean, they were going to the pub after the studio lessons. I couldn't get to a pub to save myself. No,
we're in the late 60s, aren't we?
we're in 65.
Yeah.
65, I started 65.
And you were taught by legendary tutors like, am I right in thinking Alberto Morocco and David McClure?
Alberto wasn't a tutor. He was the head of the painting school, but he did sometimes come in and would do a demonstration. He would take over your drawing and draw on top of it. And if I'd known then what I know now, I would have kept these drawings. But you just shook your head. He was very much. I'm not saying he wasn't a bureaucrat, but he was. Well, that's that. David McClure I liked very much. David was a really nice, genuine guy. Really helpful. Though to be honest, when I look back, they would be working in their own studio, own working studio. So I know that their what they did and what Alberto did, and Ian Fern was another one there. But Peter Collins, Dennis Buck, and they were all very affable. But I say David was a nice, really nice. He was the only one. I remember meeting him in Manning's, which was his bar, when I started teaching. And he came across and said, "Well, I hear you're doing very well at the teaching," and he'd obviously kept up a little bit,
I love his work actually.
Yeah,
I had one for years with the bits of silver paper on them. And
I have a
like
beautiful big David McClure I bought at the auction, which is one of the ones he worked on when I was there. I remember him working on it when I was in the studio in 1968. It's on the back, a beautiful of these Sicilian fishing boats on the beach. It's
I love the
fantastic
fact, Francis, when I'm going round to see artists, because most of, if you like, my most successful names, when you go to their own house, they've got lots of paintings by other artists. They don't just fill their houses with their own. So we've got to art school. You're mixing with real rock and roll people, and to sort of be a little bit coining the phrase, you've come a long way from Tipperary. And what then happened after Duncan of Jordanston?
Well, at Duncan of Jordanston, there wasn't even I was doing the painting. It was a 2-year general course, and then you chose or were selected to do one of the other graphic design or textile design. And I was sort of headhunted by the illustration department. They saw something what they thought they could work with, but I in the end, I stuck with painting. So 2 years as a painting. But in those days, there wasn't a career as a painter. I mean, even the lecturers weren't full-time painters. Nobody could make a career. Maybe Alan Davey, even then, he probably wasn't. So it wasn't a consideration. So almost without thinking, after you finished, you went into teachers' training college. You did a year there, and then you went into school. That's what I was saying. Everything was so easy. You just had to.
There was almost a route,
there.
Wasn't
there? There was a route, and but just before I leave that, I think that this for art education in the 70s benefited by this, but all these, the 60s was a really exciting period. People like very creative, the music industry, the art industry were going into teaching the artists, and they were bringing that energy and enthusiasm into schools. And the schools, when I first started teaching, the curriculum was a really staid, OG pattern and stuff, but it changed. Suddenly you were doing welding and fiberglass structures, because that was the 60s generation, my generation, bringing this into the schools, and I think they benefit. So art, I mean, most of the time I taught up until nearly 2000.
25 years ago, And to interrupt just for a minute, I hadn't actually appreciated until we were chatting today, because I went to Aberdeen Grammar School and you ended up finishing your career,
Yeah.
art teaching career at Aberdeen Grammar. You know, and you sort of replaced the legendary head of art who I remember, who was Mr. Will. And it's funny, all these coincidences, but they were happy days, and it was a major decision to become a full-time painter.
Yeah, it certainly was. I remember, I mean, there were one or two things. I'm a great believer in serendipity, and there were things happening. I thought, maybe I could do that, but I, it was my 50th birthday was coming up, and Teresa, my wife, you met, said, what would you like for your birthday? She was a big birthday. I said, well, actually, I'd like a year off work. And so she, give her a due, she swallowed hard. And what I'd done, I'd spoken to the rector and had organised a sabbatical, a two-term sabbatical for for a year, so I'd already had some success as a painter. I was working as a painter, but also as a head of department. It was quite quite onerous. But I really, really wanted to find out if I could make it as a painter. It was like something, an itch I just had to scratch. And so instead of hanging on another 3 or 4 years to get a pension or retirement package, in which case I probably would have been sold, I jumped ship. But they still don't believe. I met teachers from the grammar at a Christmas do not long ago. They still think I retired. They won't realise I didn't retire. I
You've never
resigned.
retired?
No, I changed jobs.
Yeah.
That was unheard of. Nobody left a job as a principal teacher of art in the school to, and walked away without a pension. But I did that.
Do you feel when you became a full-time artist, you kind of hit the ground running?
I had, I'm thinking back, I realised that it was to do with the move to the northeast. I'd lived in Dundee all my life, married, had kids there, and when the job came up at the Grammy Grant, we moved up here, and we went to stay in a little not seaside, but coastal town, Newton Hill, used to be called Skate Rock, pardon me. And the journey to school would often, would off the road be closed. You don't have to go through the countryside, and I realised that's quite interesting. We had never been driven to draw the country or the town of Dundee. I used to then go out on a Saturday morning and draw the places I'd driven past, and it turned out that they were, what I was drawing, the drawings were all starting to look the same. It was a little cottage, a couple of trees, a telegraph pole, a dry stone dyke, and that had appealed to me. And I think I said to you later, there was a kind of eureka moment when I realised that drawing maybe wasn't the thing for me. Painting was something I could do. So I'd come home in the afternoon, I'd sit I didn't have a studio, I sat in the utility room, I'd put my board up on the washing machine, and the tumble dryer would have the sketchbook I was working from, and I'd be working away on little postcard size things because I wanted to finish. I knew I wasn't have the patience to start something, go back to it. So I had little postcard size. I'd do a painting from the drawing, and I said one of the, sorry I'm going too long, but one of the things that made me stand out was how fresh my colours were.
Colour.
And that was almost accidental because in the utility room behind me was the sink. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting at the washing machine, painting away, and when I wanted to do my brush, I turned round and washed in the sink. I still do that. That studio was built like that. And so every time I was painting, it was with a clean brush. So the paint, if you keep painting with a water jar, I was using acrylics, it gets muddier and muddier and muddier, and the colours get duller and duller and duller. So without any thought or any intellectual process, I was doing something really helpful to me, and it gave my work that little edge that you need when it goes in the gallery.
You were in a happy place. You were doing what you were wanted.
Yeah.
So I think really to say it, you did hit the ground running. And I 25 years ago, I was living in Glasgow, and I was very aware. I was somebody who, whenever I had any spare salary, was buying paintings. And I remember at that point hearing about Francis Boag. And my parents were in Aberdeen. I think my mother bought a small painting by, and I remember the colour. And then somebody around that time said to me, and I said, "Oh, Francis Boag," I said, "I really like these paintings." He said, "Oh, he's part of the new generation of Scottish Colourists." And I thought, oh, that's nice to know. And would that compliment you to be called that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Scottish, what I remember, the site I live at my school last side, there was a book on the Scottish Colourists in the wee art library, and it always used to intrigue me why it was in black and white. It wasn't a colour book, so I'd always been aware of them, and I liked their work, and the Glasgow boys as well, and through them the Hague School, that progression of, and even if you take on to the Slade School of Art, that way of painting is something I liked very much.
And brought you huge success. I want to talk now, we're going to be launching your arrival to Ballater with a wonderful collection of about 8 or 10 paintings, something like that. And one of them is right behind me, which really exemplifies what, to me, Francis Boag is about. Now, Tom will drop this painting. It's of Corgaf Castle, and it's wonderful colour. And do you want to just, for 1 minute, talk about Corgaf Castle?
Yeah, the Corgaf Castle is when we had a timeshare in Spain, but used to go up to Aviemore quite a lot. And the road from here, it's at one of the main junctions is Corgaf Castle, and it stands out. It's a white castle against always a sort of brooding type background, and it's very been photographed a lot, and it's very photogenic. But I tried to paint a couple times. I never really couldn't quite get it to work. And this was a sort of, not a last resort, but I managed to get I thought that to blend in my particular, the things which are, identify my work, the almost the cartoon type geometric trees. Well, you've got I do, and the collage work be. The painting has to come first. The view for me is second, but I don't just make them up. No, in fact, I think the Italians have a word for it, capriccio, from the Renaissance, where it's not exactly what you see, but it's the thing you see, but they're manipulated around. And most of my paintings do that to a certain extent. So I'm not sure if you would ever drive past Corgaf. You'll see the castle.
Well, hold on. I would say the moment I looked at that painting, and it's modern, it's bright, it's colourful, it's happy, but the moment I looked, I said to you, that's Corgaf. I've got friends who have a view from their wonderful cottage, and there, so no, it's bang on. I want to pick up this painting now, and it's absolutely beautiful. And tell us a little bit about this one. I seem to remember also, Francis, you say, or me picking up from you, when you start a painting, you don't have a preconceived idea of a specific composition, do you?
No, painting comes first, and if you don't get, in my view, you don't get a lot of dynamism and energy in the painting at the beginning, then it won't be there at the end. You can't put it on the end. And if you're already decided what you think it's going to be, you're constrained, you're inhibited. So I make a point of just enjoying the paint, blocking in some colours, trying different mediums, and then I'll look at it, I'll leave it in the studio and think, well, it has to become somewhere sometime. And that particular one is every day I walk the dogs around. We're in a rural area, but not far from Stonehaven, and every element of that picture I can see on that dog walk. Yeah. Every element.
I think the colour palette, and that I just think it's a beautiful painting, and the way you've. Well, I know it's actually Stonehaven in the harbour, but it could really be so many different places, couldn't it?
Well, the kind of coastal thing with the buildings and the cliffs cut in, it wasn't one of my themes, if you like, but when I holiday in Ireland and drove up the Wild Atlantic Way, and suddenly I saw that there's a picture there, and but of course it's just the coastline, so it applies to Scotland as well as Ireland. I realised that you could, I'm always trying to find a different composition, if you like, a different way.
I think it's relatively rare compared to other artists in my stable when you say there's no preconceived idea, and I think it's rather refreshing and really rather different altogether. This painting, I shouldn't have favourites, but I also love it. I love the still life. I like the modern twists from maybe classic still lifes from certain of the old late Scottish colourists, but it's your ability, Francis, with colour and the pinks. Do you want to add anything to tell me maybe about the vase as well?
The painting's a little bit unusual. It's not my normal, and that the inspiration came from, I think, possibly the pandemic, looking at other artists' work on Instagram. No, have you got an Instagram feed? You know that things come up that you've no idea. There was an artist's work came up I'd never seen before, a girl called Floris Hutchings, and she's going to be a big artist one day. And I looked. And I thought, how could she do that? She drew her tables, the perspective was all wrong and her drawing was all wonky. And it turned out to be, it was very sophisticated and very simple. And so that was the kind of basic structure I was trying to get. And I was looking for something a little bit different from the usual vases and stuff I use. And I came across this artist called Jonas Wood, who paints these huge, I thought he was a potter, but he's a painter as well. He paints these huge, American painter, of Greek vases with the vases with the fighters and the figures on. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm going to try and combine these. It's more like it was very much a fun piece for me. A kind of you're trying to imagine a musical theme where you're trying to hit the right notes here and balance the harmonies and get everything to work with the flowers. And so normally the flowers will be the big thing in any little still life I do, but in this case you see the vase first. I think the flowers almost come as an afterthought.
Well, I think it's a wonderful painting, and I know certain people who'll be watching this and, David, you think everything is wonderful. I don't actually, I won't use that word. But I also am so chuffed after years since we opened 6 years ago of trying to persuade Francis Boag to join our stable of artists that he's now able to for various reasons, and the Ballater Gallery will have the paintings on display certainly from the beginning of March, maybe the end of February, and I'd just like to turn around and thank Francis very much for allowing me here, and I hope you're as excited about showing in Ballater as I am.
I absolutely am, David. I'm really looking forward to showing with you in Ballater. But I'm always up for new experiences, and I hope this will be as good as it promises to be.
Well, I would really like just to say thank you to Francis hugely for agreeing to join our stable of artists after all these years of trying to persuade. And I think you, our mailing list, will be thrilled to look at these paintings. And whether the paintings end up in London or LA or Aberdeen, I think they'll make you smile, they'll bring you joy, and they'll be great to add to a collection. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.